Rinaldo is an opera by George Frideric Handel, composed in 1711, and was the first Italian-language opera written specifically for the London stage. The libretto was prepared by Giacomo Rossi from a scenario provided by Aaron Hill, and the work was first performed at the Queen's Theatre in London's Haymarket on 24 February 1711. The story of love, war and redemption, set at the time of the First Crusade, is loosely based on Torquato Tasso's epic poem Gerusalemme liberata, and its staging involved many original and vivid effects. It was a great success with the public, despite negative reactions from literary critics hostile to the contemporary trend towards Italian entertainment in English theatres. Handel composed Rinaldo quickly, borrowing and adapting music from operas and other works that he had composed during a long stay in Italy in the years 1706–10, during which he established considerable reputation. In the years following the premiere, he made numerous amendments to the score, with its spectacular vocal and orchestral passages. Rinaldo is regarded by critics as one of Handel's greatest operas. Of its individual numbers, the soprano aria Lascia ch'io pianga has become a particular favorite, and is a popular concert piece. Handel went on to dominate opera in England for several decades. Rinaldo was revived in London regularly up to 1717, and was a revised version in 1731, of all Handel's operas. Rinaldo was the most frequently performed during his lifetime. After 1731, however, the opera was not staged for more than 200 years. Renewed interest in Baroque opera during the 20th century led to the first modern professional production in Handel's birthplace, Halle, Germany, in 1954. The opera was mounted sporadically over the following 30 years, after a successful run at New York's Metropolitan Opera in 1984. Performances and recordings of the work have become more frequent worldwide. The opera's centenary in 2011 brought a modernized production at the Glyndebourne Festival. Background: Handel began to compose operas in Hamburg, where he spent the years 1703–06. His principal influences were Johann Mattheson and Reinhard Geiser. At the time, German opera as a genre was still not clearly defined. In Hamburg, the term Singspiel rather than opera described music dramas that combined elements of French and Italian opera, often with passages of spoken German dialogue. The music was, in the words of historian Donald J. Groud, tinged with the serious, heavy formality of Lutheran Germany. The first of Handel's early works in the German style was Almira, a considerable success when it was premiered on 8 January 1705. Over the next 3 years Handel composed 3 more operas in the German style, but all of these are now lost. However, fragments of the music from these works have been identified in later operas. In autumn 1706, Handel went to Italy. He stayed for long periods in Florence, Rome, Naples and Venice, making frequent visits to the opera houses and concert halls. He obtained introductions to leading musicians, among them Arcangelo Gorelli, Alessandro and Domenico Scarlatti, and Agostino Stefani, and met numerous singers and performers. For these acquaintances Handel learned the essential characteristics of Italian music, in particular, fluency in the treatment of Italian verse, accurate declamation and flexible harmonic rhythm in recitative, drawing the necessary distinction between vocal and instrumental material and, above all, the release of wonderful melodic gift. Handel's first Italian opera, Rodriguez, showed an incomplete grasp of Italian style. With much of Geiser's Hamburg influence still evident, it was not a success when premiered in Florence. In late November or early December 1707, He followed this by a lengthy visit to Rome, where opera performances were then forbidden by papal decree, and honed his skills through the composition of cantatas and oratorios. In Rome, Handel met Cardinal Vincenzo Grimani, a diplomat and spare-time librettist. The result of this meeting was a collaboration which produced Handel's second Italian opera, Agrippina. After this work's triumphant premiere at the Teatro San Giovanni Grisostomo in Venice on the 26th of December 1709, Handel became, says biographer P. H. Lang, world-famous and the idol of a spoiled and knowledgeable audience. This sudden recognition led to eager competition for Handel's services. Among those most keen to employ him was Prince Georg Ludwig, the Elector of Hanover and future King George I of Great Britain. In June 1710, Handel accepted the appointment of Kapellmeister to George's Hanover court, under terms that gave him considerable scope to pursue his own interests. On the basis of this freedom, in late 1710 Handel left Hanover for London, possibly in response to an earlier invitation from members of the English nobility. By 1711, informed London audiences had become familiar with the nature of Italian opera through the numerous pastiches and adaptations that had been staged. The former Royal Academy of Music principal, Curtis Price, writes that the popularity of these pieces was the result of a deliberate strategy aimed at the suppression of English opera. Handel's music was relatively unknown in England, though his reputation from Agrippina was considerable elsewhere. A short Italian dialogue he had written in honor of Queen Anne's birthday was well received when performed at St. James's Palace on the 6th of February, 1711. In London, by means which are not documented, Handel secured a commission to write an Italian opera for the Queen's Theatre in the Haymarket. This theatre, designed and built by Sir John Vanbrugh, had become London's main opera house. Its manager, Aaron Hill, intended to mount the first Italian opera written specifically for London and had engaged an all-Italian company for the 1710-11 opera season. Hill employed an Italian poet and language teacher, Giacomo Rossi, to write a libretto based on a scenario that Hill prepared himself. His subject Hill chose Gerusalemme liberata, an epic of the First Crusade by the 16th-century Italian poet Torquato Tasso. The opera was called Rinaldo, after its main protagonist. Hill was determined to exploit to the full the opportunities for lavish spectacle afforded by the theatre's machinery. His aim, according to Dina Knapp, was to combine the virtuosity of Italian singing with the extravagance of the 17th-century masque. Roles. Synopsis. Place in and around the city of Jerusalem during the First Crusade. Time 1099. Act 1. The Crusader army under Goffredo is laying siege to Jerusalem, where the Saracen king Argante is confined with his troops. With Goffredo are his brother Eustasio, his daughter Ormirina, and the knight Rinaldo. As Goffredo sings of the coming victory, Rinaldo declares his love for Ormirina, and Goffredo confirms that she will be Rinaldo's bride when Jerusalem falls. Ormirina urges Rinaldo to fight boldly and assure victory. As she departs, a herald announces the approach of Argante from the city. Eustasio surmises that the king fears defeat. This seems to be confirmed when Argante, after a grandiose entrance, requests a 3-day truce, to which Goffredo graciously assents. After Goffredo leaves, Argante ponders his love for Armida, the queen of Damascus, who is also a powerful sorceress, and considers the help her powers might bring him. As he muses, Armida arrives from the sky in a fiery chariot. She has divined that the Saracens' only chance of victory lies in vanquishing Rinaldo, and has the power, she claims, to achieve this. The scene changes to a garden, with fountains and birds, where Rinaldo and Armida are celebrating their love. They are interrupted as Armida appears, and wrests Armida from Rinaldo's embrace. Rinaldo draws his sword to defend his lover, but a black cloud descends to envelop Armida and Armida, and they are borne away. Rinaldo mourns the loss of his loved one. When Goffredo and Eustasio arrive, they comfort Rinaldo, and propose they visit a Christian magician who may have the power to save Armida. Rinaldo, left alone, prays for strength. Act 2 A seashore. As Goffredo, Eustasio and Rinaldo near the magician's lair, a beautiful woman calls from her boat, promising Rinaldo that she can take him to Armida. Two mermaids sing of love's delights, and urge Rinaldo to go in the boat. He hesitates, unsure what to do, and his companions attempt to restrain him. Angry at the abduction of his loved one, Rinaldo enters the boat, which immediately sails off. Goffredo and Eustasio are shocked at Rinaldo's impulsiveness and believe that he has deserted the cause. In Armida's palace garden, Armida mourns her captivity. Argante joins her and, overcome by her beauty, confesses that he now loves her. He promises that as proof of his feelings he will defy Armida's wrath and secure Armida's freedom. Meanwhile, Rinaldo is brought before the triumphant Armida. As he demands that Armida be set free, Armida finds herself drawn to his noble spirit, and declares her love. When he angrily rejects her, she uses her powers to assume Armida's form, but Rinaldo suspects trickery, and departs. Armida, resuming her own appearance, is furious at her rejection yet retains feelings of tender love. She decides on another attempt to ensnare Rinaldo, and transforms herself back into Armida's shape, but then encounters Argante. Believing her to be Armida, Argante repeats his earlier promises of love and freedom. Swiftly resuming her own form, Armida denounces his infidelity and vows vengeance. Argante defiantly confirms his love for Armida and declares that he no longer needs Armida's help. She departs in a fury. Act 3 A mountainside. At the magician's cavern, Goffredo and Eustasio are told by the magician that Armida is being held captive in Armida's palace at the mountain top. Ignoring the magician's warning that they will need special powers, the pair set off for the palace but are quickly driven back by Armida's monsters. The magician then gives them magic wands that transcend Armida's power, and they set off again. This time they overcome the monsters, but as they reach the gates of the palace it disappears, leaving them clinging to a rock in the midst of a stormy sea. They climb the rock and descend out of sight. In the palace garden, Armida prepares to kill Armida. Rinaldo draws his sword, but Armida is protected from his wrath by spirits. Suddenly Goffredo and Eustasio arrive, but as they touch the garden with the wands it disappears, leaving them all on an empty plain with the city of Jerusalem visible in the distance. Armida, after a last attempt to kill Armida, also disappears as Rinaldo strikes her with his sword. The remaining four celebrate the reunion, while Goffredo announces that the attack on Jerusalem will begin the next day. In the city, Argante and Armida, in danger from a common enemy, become reconciled and prepare their troops for battle. Goffredo's army advances, and battle finally commences. After a struggle for supremacy, Jerusalem falls to Goffredo. Argante is overcome and captured by Rinaldo, while Armida is taken by Eustasio. Rinaldo and Armida celebrate the love and forthcoming marriage. Armida, accepting her defeat, breaks the wand which is the source of her evil power and together with Argante embraces Christianity. Christianity. Goffredo expresses his forgiveness to his beaten foes and sets them free, before victors and vanquished join in a chorus of reconciliation. Revisions 1717 and 1731. The opera was frequently revised, most particularly in 1717 and in 1731. Modern performances are usually a conflation of the versions available, up to and including 1717. These changes had no significant effect on the plot. In the 1731 version, however, in Act 2 Armida imitates Almirina's voice rather than assuming her appearance, and Argante declares his love to Almirina's portrait rather than to her face. In Act 3 the marches and the battle scene are cut. Armida and Argante remained unrepentant and vanish in a chariot drawn by dragons before the conclusion. Compositional history. In a letter dedicating the new opera to Queen Anne, Hill wrote of his choice of story, "I could not choose a finer subject than the celebrated story of Rinaldo and Armida." He had, however, exercised a poet's privilege to render Tasso's work suitable for the stage. This privilege moved the opera's story a long way from Tasso's original. Hill invented a new heroine, Almirina, to provide the main love interest with the hero Rinaldo, and the relationship between Rinaldo and Armida scarcely figures in the opera. Likewise, the affair between Argante and Armida is Hill's creation, as of the conversions to Christianity, the latter possibly a sop to English susceptibilities. Rossi was required to turn the elaborate scenario into verses, a relatively light task which, he said, was the delivery of a few evenings. Nevertheless, Rossi complained that Handel hardly gave him time to write. To my great wonder I saw an entire opera set to music by that surprising genius with the greatest degree of perfection in 2 weeks. Price argues that Rossi's role was beyond that of a mere versifier, quoting Hill's words of praise for Rossi in the preface to the libretto, which suggests that Rossi was the senior partner in the birth of the libretto. Price also points to the likely influences on the structure of Rinaldo from 2 British semi-operas, George Granville's The British Enchanters, and Purcell's King Arthur. The transformations of characters to others' shapes, Price contends, is likely derived from John Dryden's play Amphitryon. Handel's speed of composition was assisted by his inclusion of arias and other numbers from his earlier Italian works, among them Bel Piacere and Bastarche Sol from Agrippina, Sibylla Gli from the dramatic cantata Acci, Galatea e Polifemo, and the Mermaid's Song Il Vostro Maggio from the cantata Aresta Il Passo. Almirina's aria La Sia Ch'io Pianga had appeared in the oratorio Il Trionfo del Tempo e del Disinganno. The suitability of some of these insertions has been questioned by later commentators. Dean and Knapp cite Argant's Sibylla Gli, with its references to the hissing snakes of Alecto and the howls of Scylla, as ludicrously inappropriate to accompany the king's grand Act 1 entrance. Many other numbers, Dean and Knapp estimate 2/3 of the arias were adapted and partly recomposed from earlier sources. In the years between the 1711 premiere and the 1717 revival, Handel made various adjustments to the score and the vocal parts, often to accommodate the requirements of new singers. Details of these changes are difficult to establish since the performing librettos and scores for these years no longer exist. For 1717, more significant revisions were made. The role of Eustasio was merged with that of Goffredo, and Argant's part was rewritten to accommodate an alto voice. Thus in this revival all the principal parts were sung in high voice ranges. Handel's revisions for the 1731 revival were even more radical, since they not only affected individual musical numbers but involved alterations in the plot. The production was advertised with new scenes and clothes, but many of the changes involved reducing or eliminating the pyrotechnics and special effects that had characterized the original production. The only significant new music in the 1731 production is a long accompanied recitative for Rinaldo, though other numbers are changed or cut. Goffredo becomes a tenor, Armida a contralto, the herald and the magician become basses. Dean and Knapp summarize the 1731 revisions as a striking illustration of the seeming vandalism with which Handel could treat his works in revival, performance history and reception. Early performances. The 19th-century music critic George Hogarth wrote of Rinaldo that he romantic interest of the subject, the charms of the music, and the splendor of the spectacle made it an object of general attraction. Its premiere at the Queen's Theatre on the 24th of February 1711, possibly under Handel's direction, was a triumphant success. A further 12 performances were immediately scheduled. At the end of the run, popular demand was such that 2 more were added. Notwithstanding this enthusiasm, the financial strains of such a grand production led to legal actions against Hill from unpaid craftsmen. 9 days after the premiere, the Lord Chamberlain's office revoked the impresario's license. Under Hill's successes, the opera was played at the theatre in most seasons until 1716–17, by which time it had totaled 47 performances, far more than any other opera at the Queen's. The public's general enthusiasm for the opera was not shared by the writers Joseph Addison and Richard Steele, who used the pages of the new journal, The Spectator, to pour scorn and ridicule on the work. Addison may have been motivated by his own failure, a few years previously, to establish a school of English opera with Rosamund, on which he had collaborated with the composer Thomas Clayton. It was absurd, he wrote, that theatre audiences should be exposed to entire evenings of entertainment in a foreign tongue. We no longer understand the language of our own stage. Addison did, however, praise the singing of Niccolo Grimaldi, the celebrated alto castrator known as Niccolini, in the title role. Steele compared the production unfavorably to a Punch and Judy show, particularly criticizing certain bungled scene changes and the poor quality of effects such as thunder and lightning. Hogarth made light of such comments. Notwithstanding the influence which The Spectator influenced over the taste and manners of the age, its attacks seem to have had little effect in turning people from the entertainment. Some sources have suggested that the opera was performed in Dublin in March or April 1711, though according to Dean and Knapp there is no record of such an occasion. In November 1715, a version mainly in German was performed in Hamburg. This production, based on a translation by the playwright Berthold Find, proved to be very popular and was revived in the city on numerous occasions during the 1720s. A pastiche of the opera, with additional numbers by Leonardo Leo, was presented by Leo at the Royal Court in Naples in 1718, with Niccolini singing his original role. After 1716–17, Rinaldo was not seen on the London stage until 1731, when it was revived in its revised form at the King's Theatre. During these years Handel's industry was such that he was producing a new opera for this theatre every 9 months. The 1731 production of Rinaldo received 6 performances, bringing the London total for the work to 53 in Handel's lifetime, the most for any of his operas. After 1731, Handel had fewer stage successes, and performances of his operas became rarer. Changes in taste and style combined, as Grout concludes, to thrust into ill-deserved oblivion, as a result of which Rinaldo was not staged anywhere for 200 years. Modern revivals. The first 20th-century production of Rinaldo which can be specifically verified was a performance in London, in February 1933, by pupils of the Hammersmith Day Continuation School, though Dean and Knapp mention a shortened version in Czech, at the Prague Conservatory in 1923. The first modern professional performance was at the Halle Opera House in June 1954, under Horst Tanu Marggraf, as part of the Handel Festival. On 17 May 1961, the Handel Opera Society, directed by Charles Farncombe, staged the work at London Sadler's Wells Theatre, a production that was revived 4 years later. The first American performance was a concert version at Carnegie Hall on 27 March 1972, given by the Handel Society of New York, with Stephen Simon conducting and Beverly Wolfe as Rinaldo. The first staging of the opera in America was at the Houston Grand Opera under Lawrence Foster in October 1975, with Marilyn Horne in the title role, a part with which she would become particularly associated. In July 1982, Horne sang the part alongside John Alexander's Goffredo and Samuel Ramey's Argante, in a National Arts Center production in Ottawa directed by Frank Corsaro. The performance, with Mario Bernardi conducting the Onassi Orchestra, was applauded by Montreal Gazette critic Eric McLean for its fine music-making and its displays of architectural and sartorial splendor. 18 months later, on 19 January 1984, Bernardi and Corsaro, with Horne, Ramey and Benita Valente from the Ottawa cast, brought the production to New York for the work's debut at the Metropolitan Opera. The production was loaned to the Met for its centennial season by the National Arts Centre of Canada, in deep appreciation of the many years during which Canadians have enjoyed opera from the Met, on tour, on radio and in New York. Donald Henahan in the New York Times praised all the singers in turn, with a special mention for Valenta's plaintive and affecting rendering of the popular aria Lascia Ch'io Pianga. But, says Henahan, the loudest cheers of the night went at last to the choreographer, Eugene Collins, and an incredibly nimble corps of tumbling warriors. After 10 performances at the Metropolitan Opera House, the production was taken in May to Washington, D.C., and toured in the U.S. before returning to New York in June for several outdoors performances. For the mid-1980s onwards, performances of Rinaldo became more frequent worldwide. In June 1989 it was staged at La Fenice in Venice, under John Fisher, again with Marilyn Horne. This production was criticized by critic and music scholar Stanley Sadie, in his review of the live recording, for straying too far from the composer's original intentions, particularly in the rearrangement of material and the extent of cuts. Singers were, Sadie says, allowed too much freedom to ornament the vocal lines. Some of the cadenzas were preposterous. The opera reached Australia in 1999, at the Sydney Opera House under Patrick Summers, and was performed there again in July-August 2005 under Trevor Pinnock, with Michael Chance as Rinaldo. The New Century saw a number of performances across Europe, including an appearance at the Göttingen International Handel Festival in 2004, with Nicholas McGuigan conducting Concerto Köln. This production was well received by the public, but was criticized by Jochen Bryholtz of Opera News for poor staging, indifferent singing and a substandard performance from the orchestra. Zurich Opera's 2008 production, directed by Jens Daniel Herzog and conducted by William Christie, threw aside all convention by representing the action in a 21st-century airport lounge and conference center, with Rinaldo dressed in a double-breasted navy blazer and needing a drink. Characters go up and down on stage escalators, and the set spins to show various areas of the lounge and terminal. There is a dissection of a small, white furry animal, a large snake, some allusions to Bond girls and character transformations. The Christians pull guns on the Muslims at a signing ceremony. It was, wrote Associated Press critic Ronald Blum, outrageous and entertaining. A concert version of Rinaldo was given at the 2009 Edinburgh Festival by the Bach Collegium Japan, conducted by Masaraki Suzuki, with the Japanese soprano Maki Mori as Irina. During the opera's centenary year in 2011, the Glyndebourne Festival mounted a new production directed by Robert Carson, designed by Gideon Davey, and conducted by Ottavio Dantone with the Orchestra of the Age of Enlightenment in the pit. The production is set in a school where Rinaldo is a student, initially the victim of bullying, who enters into the world of the Crusades. The Glyndebourne Festival Opera brought a semi-staged version of this production to the 2011 proms.